brighter than ever before. 6 months after the incident at Millbrook Station, Cooper sat in his backyard watching his kids play while he cleaned his service boots. The evening news played from the kitchen radio, where his wife Sarah was preparing dinner. And in local news, the radio announcer said, the Millbrook Station Community Outreach Program celebrated its successful first 6 months today. The program, started by reformed local resident Michael Davidson, has helped dozens of at-risk youth find employment and education opportunities. Cooper smiled slightly, remembering the face of the biker who had tried to rob him that night. Snake, no, Michael Davidson now had certainly taken their encounter to heart. The doorbell rang. Sarah answered it, then called out to him, James, there's someone here to see you. Cooper walked to the front door, finding a clean-shaven, well-dressed man standing there. It took him a moment to recognize him without the leather jacket and angry expression. It was Snake. Staff Sergeant Cooper, Michael said formally, standing straight. I hope you don't mind me finding your address. I asked around at the base. Cooper studied the man before him. Gone was the threatening biker who had tried to assault him 6 months ago. This person wore pressed khakis and a polo shirt, his former gang tattoos covered by long sleeves. Come in, Cooper said, gesturing to the living room. You look well. Michael sat down, his hands folded in his lap, a far cry from the aggressive stance he had taken at the station. I wanted to thank you. That night, it changed everything. Sarah brought them both coffee, and Cooper sat across from his former attacker. I hear you're doing good work at the station now. The community outreach program was my idea, Michael explained. After what happened, I realized there were better ways to use my influence. Young kids used to look up to me because I was tough. Now they look up to me because I'm helping them get jobs, finish school. Cooper nodded, sipping his coffee. Sometimes it takes a hard lesson to show us a better path. That's actually why I'm here, Michael said, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a folder. The police academy asked me to help with their community relations program. They're using the footage from that night as a training video, how to handle confrontations without excessive force. Cooper looked through the folder. It contained newspaper clippings about the station's transformation, statistics showing the drop in crime rates, and photos of Michael working with young people. But there's something else, Michael continued. I'm starting a program for veterans, helping them find work when they come home. Would you consider being an advisor? Your name carries a lot of weight now, especially after that night. Cooper was quiet for a moment, thinking. His wife Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway, smiling. She knew her husband's heart for helping others. The real lesson from that night wasn't about fighting, Cooper finally said. It was about choices. I gave you a choice to walk away. You eventually chose to change your life. Now you're giving others the same opportunity. Michael nodded earnestly. That's exactly it. When you had me pinned down, you could have really hurt me, but instead, you showed me there was a better way. I want to do the same for others. Cooper extended his hand. I'll help with your program, but on one condition. Anything, Michael said quickly. Keep calling me James. We're not in the military or at the train station anymore. We're just two men trying to make our community better. They shook hands, both men reflecting on how much had changed since that night at Millbrook Station. Outside, the sun was setting over a neighborhood that was safer and stronger because one soldier had chosen to handle a bad situation with wisdom instead of anger. Sarah called everyone for dinner, and Michael stood to leave. At the door, he turned back one last time. You know, people still talk about that night, but they don't talk about the fight anymore. They talk about how it changed things, how one incident made everyone realize we could be better. Cooper smiled. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest moments. Take care, Michael. As he watched Michael drive away, Cooper thought about how life worked in strange ways. He had gone to the train station that night just wanting to get home to his family. Instead, he had started a chain of events that transformed an entire community. The true victory hadn't been in the fight he won, but in the lives that were changed because of how he chose to handle it. 2 weeks after the incident at Millbrook Station, Officer Sarah Martinez sat at her desk reviewing security footage. She had watched the recording from that night at least a dozen times, studying how one soldier had efficiently handled 3 aggressive attackers without causing serious injury. The video was already being used in the police academy's training sessions. "Chief wants to see you," her partner said, poking his head into her office. Something about that train station incident. In the chief's office, Martinez found him talking to a man in a military uniform, not the same soldier from the video, but someone with similar bearing and presence. "Officer Martinez," the chief said, "this is Captain Richards from the Special Forces Training Division. He's here about our station incident." Captain Richards smiled. "That footage you sent to the military police was quite interesting. We've identified the soldier, Staff Sergeant James Cooper. He was one of our top hand-to-hand combat instructors before his last deployment." Martinez nodded. "His technique was incredible. I've never seen anyone handle a situation like that so efficiently. That's why I'm here," Richards said. "We'd like to use the footage for our training programs." Cooper demonstrated perfect escalation control and minimum necessary force. It's textbook Special Forces protocol. The chief leaned forward in his chair. "There's something else you should know. Remember the leader of those bikers, Snake?" Martinez checked her notes. "Michael Snake Davidson, age 32, multiple prior arrests for assault and battery. He came to the station yesterday," the chief said, surprising her. "Asked to speak with me personally. Said he wanted to make some changes in his life." Richards raised an eyebrow. "What kind of changes?" The chief pulled out a piece of paper. "He's enrolled in a GED program at the community college, applied for a job at the local auto repair shop, even asked about our community outreach programs." Martinez couldn't hide her surprise. "The same guy from the video? Are you sure?" "He said something interesting," the chief continued. "Said that soldier didn't just beat him, he taught him something about respect, about using power responsibly. Said it was the first time anyone had ever beaten him without trying to humiliate him." Captain Richards nodded knowingly. "That's Cooper. He always told his students that the goal of combat isn't to destroy your opponent. It's to change the situation from dangerous to safe with minimal harm." The station security officer knocked and entered, carrying a new file. "Chief, you might want to see this. The incident rate at Millbrook Station has dropped by 80% in the past 2 weeks. No reported assaults, no robbery, no vandalism." Martinez looked at the statistics. "What about Snake's friends? The other 2 bikers?" "Tommy Reynolds, the nervous one, found work at a warehouse," the security officer reported. "The other one, Mark Wilson, hasn't been seen at the station since that night. Local business owners say the whole atmosphere around the station has changed." Captain Richards stood up, straightening his uniform. "This is why we train our soldiers the way we do. It's not just about winning fights. It's about changing situations and sometimes changing lives." The chief signed some papers, authorizing the release of the footage for military training. 1 soldier, 1 night, 15 minutes of action, and it transformed an entire community. Speaking of Cooper, Martinez asked, "What did he say when you contacted him about the incident?" Richards laughed. "That's the best part, he didn't even mention it in his reports. We only found out because of your footage. When we asked him about it, he just said he had a minor delay at the train station on his way home." The security officer shook his head in amazement. 3 armed attackers, and he calls it a minor delay. "That's what makes Cooper special," Richards explained. To him, it wasn't about being a hero or teaching anyone a lesson. He just wanted to get home to his family safely, and he handled the threat in the most efficient, professional way possible. Martinez looked at the paused security footage on her computer screen. The image of Cooper calmly handling 3 attackers while hardly moving from his spot. Well, those bikers certainly picked the wrong soldier to mess with that night. No, Richards corrected her. They picked exactly the right one. Someone else might have hurt them badly or gotten hurt themselves. Cooper gave them something much more valuable than a beating. He gave them a chance to change. As they finished their meeting, the sun was setting over Millbrook Station. For the first time in years, people were walking the platforms without fear. And somewhere in the city, a former biker named Snake was studying for his GED. His shoulders still sore, but his future looking brighter than ever. Snake struggled to his feet, his legs shaky and his pride hurt far worse than his body. He watched as Cooper calmly picked up his duffel bag and brushed off his uniform, straightening his medals with practiced precision. The soldier's breathing hadn't even quickened during the entire confrontation. The train's headlights were growing brighter in the distance, its rumble getting louder as it approached Millbrook Station. Cooper glanced at his watch. 12:15 a.m. The entire incident had taken less than 30 minutes, but it had changed everything about Snake's world. "You know what the worst part is?" Cooper said, adjusting his cap. "I tried to warn you multiple times, but you were so focused on being the tough guy that you couldn't see what was right in front of you." Snake touched his shoulder where Cooper had applied the pressure points. It still tingled, and he knew he'd have bruises tomorrow. But it was his ego that had taken the real beating. In less than half an hour, his reputation as the tough guy of Millbrook Station had been completely destroyed. Who are you really?" Snake asked, his voice hoarse. Cooper looked at him for a moment before answering. "I'm just a soldier coming home to his family. But before that, I spent 6 years as a hand-to-hand combat instructor for Special Forces. I trained over 3,000 soldiers in close-quarter combat. What you did tonight, I've practiced defending against that exact scenario probably 10,000 times." The station security camera in the distance blinked its red light, reminding them both that everything had been recorded. Snake's face paled as he realized the implications. "The camera," he started to say, "will show you and your friends assaulting a uniformed soldier with deadly weapons," Cooper finished for him. "The footage will go to the police tomorrow morning unless—" Snake looked up quickly. "Unless what?" "Unless you make some changes," Cooper said. "I saw the military veteran patches on your jacket. You respect soldiers enough to wear their symbols, so start actually respecting what those symbols mean." The train was very close now, its lights illuminating the whole platform. Snake could see his reflection in the station's windows. His leather jacket was dirty from the fall, his face was scratched, and his usual confident swagger was gone. "Hey Race, what's going to happen?" Cooper continued. "You're going to leave this station and never come back. Find somewhere else to hang out. Stop threatening people. Get a job. Be better than this." "And if I do that?" Snake asked. "Then maybe the security footage disappears," Cooper said. "Maybe this just becomes a story about how you learned an important lesson instead of a story about how you went to prison for assaulting a soldier." The train was pulling into the station now, its brakes squealing as it slowed down. Snake looked at Cooper one last time, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not just a man in uniform, but someone who had earned every medal on his chest the hard way. "I'm sorry," Snake said quietly, the words feeling strange in his mouth. "I was wrong." Cooper nodded, accepting the apology without comment. The train doors opened with a hiss, and a few late-night passengers stepped out onto the platform. They saw Cooper in his pristine uniform and Snake in his dirty leather jacket and naturally moved away from Snake. "Remember what happened here," Cooper said, picking up his duffel bag. "Remember that the uniform isn't just for show, and the next soldier you meet might not be as patient as I was." Snake watched as Cooper boarded the train, taking a seat by the window. Their eyes met one final time through the glass as the train began to move. In that moment, Snake realized that this man had given him something valuable, a chance to change his life before it was too late. As the train disappeared into the night, Snake limped toward his motorcycle, leaving behind not just the station but also the person he had been. His shoulder ached, his pride was shattered, but his mind was clear for the first time in years. Sometimes the best lessons in life come from the people you least expect, and in ways you never wanted. For Snake, that lesson had come from a soldier at a train station, teaching him that real strength isn't about intimidation. It's about control, discipline, and knowing when to walk away. Pride won. With a roar of pure rage, Snake launched himself at Cooper, trying to tackle him around the waist. At the same time, the scarred man, still gasping for breath, swung a desperate punch at Cooper's head. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Cooper's right hand caught Snake's shoulder, his left hand gripped Snake's belt, and in one smooth motion he redirected the bigger man's momentum. Snake found himself flying through the air, his world spinning before crashing hard onto the platform floor. The impact knocked all the air from his lungs. Without pausing, Cooper turned to face the scarred man's punch. Instead of blocking, he stepped into the attack, his forearm deflecting the blow while his other hand struck like a snake. His fingers found pressure points in the man's neck that his special forces instructors had taught him years ago. The scarred man's eyes went wide, his legs buckled, and he collapsed to his knees. "That's a carotid pressure point," Cooper explained calmly, as if teaching a class. "You'll feel dizzy for about 30 seconds. Don't try to stand up." Tommy, watching from the stairs, finally broke. He turned and ran, his footsteps echoing through the station as he fled into the night. The sound of his motorcycle starting up and racing away filled the air moments later. Snake tried to push himself up from the floor, but his arms were shaking too badly. The scarred man remained on his knees, his face pale, struggling to make the world stop spinning. "Stay down," Cooper advised them both. "You've had enough." But Snake wasn't finished. Years of being the toughest man in every room had taught him never to give up. With trembling hands, he reached for his boot again, where he kept a second knife. Cooper saw the movement and sighed. "Really? You want to make this worse?" Before Snake could grab the knife, Cooper moved with military precision. His boot stepped on Snake's wrist, pinning it to the ground. His other foot swept Snake's legs together, and in one fluid motion, Cooper dropped to one knee on Snake's back. His hands found specific points on Snake's shoulder and arm, applying carefully controlled pressure. "Right now," Cooper said, his voice professional and detached, "I'm using less than 10% pressure on your shoulder joint. At 30%, the pain will make you pass out. At 50%, the joint dislocates. Would you like me to demonstrate?" Snake tried to struggle, but Cooper increased the pressure slightly. A high-pitched whimper escaped Snake's throat. "I've spent years learning exactly how much force to use," Cooper continued. "In combat, you need to know how to stop an enemy without killing them. Right now, I could dislocate your shoulder, break your arm in 3 places, or make you lose consciousness. Or you could say you're done and we can all go home." The scarred man had managed to get to his feet, though he was swaying slightly. He looked at Cooper, then at Snake pinned to the ground, and made his decision. He raised his hands in surrender and backed away toward the stairs. "Smart choice," Cooper said to him. "Take your bike and go home. Think about finding better friends." The scarred man didn't need to be told twice. He turned and hurried away, leaving his leader behind. Cooper turned his attention back to Snake, who was still pinned beneath him. "It's just you and me now. What's it going to be? Should I demonstrate what 50% pressure feels like?" For the first time in his life, Snake felt true fear. This wasn't like street fights or bar brawls, this was something entirely different. Cold, professional, and absolutely controlled. The soldier wasn't angry or trying to prove anything. He was simply handling a threat with practiced efficiency. "I'm done," Snake finally gasped. "I give up." Cooper held the pressure for one more second, making sure Snake meant it, then released him and stood up. Snake rolled over, clutching his shoulder, looking up at the soldier with a mixture of fear and respect. "The train's coming," Cooper said, nodding toward the tracks where lights were visible in the distance. "I suggest you be gone before it arrives. And Snake, find a new station to hang around. This one's not yours anymore." The night's lesson had been painful but clear. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the quiet one in uniform who's trying to avoid trouble. Snake wiped more blood from his nose, his eyes burning with a dangerous mix of rage and humiliation. In all his years of running Millbrook Station, no one had ever made him look foolish in front of his crew. Something had to give. "You think you're so special with your fancy moves?" Snake snarled, pulling a switchblade from his boot. The blade snapped open with a metallic click that echoed through the empty station. "Let's see how you handle this, soldier boy." Cooper's expression didn't change, but his eyes focused on the blade. His mind automatically calculated distances, angles, and risks just as had been trained. The knife changed everything. It meant these men were willing to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "A knife," Cooper said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "Now you're escalating from assault to attempted murder. Are you sure you want to add 10 years to your prison sentence?" Tommy, the nervous one, started backing away even further. "Snake, man, this is getting crazy." He's not like the others. Shut up. Snake roared, never taking his eyes off Cooper. Nobody makes me look weak. Nobody. The scarred man, still nursing his twisted arm, reached down and grabbed a piece of broken pipe from near the platform edge. Now Cooper faced two armed opponents, with Tommy hovering uncertainly in the background. Last warning, Cooper said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had faced far worse situations. Drop the weapons. Once I move, I won't hold back anymore. I've spent too many nights in combat zones to play games with armed attackers. Snake laughed, but it was a hollow sound. Big words from a man about to learn some real-world lessons. Your army training won't help you against street fighters like us. Cooper's reply was cold and precise. I'm not army. I'm special forces. And that knife you're holding? I trained over 3,000 hours specifically in knife defense. The scar on your friend's hand shows he likes to slash from the left. Your stance tells me you prefer to stab straight. Neither will work. Something in Cooper's voice, the absolute certainty of his words, made Snake hesitate for just a moment. The soldier wasn't boasting or trying to sound tough. He was simply stating facts. You're lying, the scarred man said, but his voice wavered. Nobody trains that much for knife fighting. The human body has 8 major arteries close to the surface, Cooper continued, almost like he was giving a lecture. I can reach 4 of them from where I'm standing. Your knife gives you reach, but it also commits you to certain angles of attack. That pipe your friend is holding? It takes 1.5 seconds to swing it effectively. I can move 3 feet in 1 second. Snake's hand tightened on the knife handle. Stop talking. The cameras are still recording, Cooper reminded them. Right now, you're on video pulling deadly weapons on a uniformed soldier. Think about how that will play out in court. Tommy finally found his voice again. Snake, he's right. This ain't worth it. We need to attack. Snake screamed, lunging forward with the knife while the scarred man swung the pipe. Cooper moved. To an outside observer, what happened next would have looked impossible. Cooper stepped inside Snake's knife thrust while simultaneously ducking under the pipe swing. His left hand caught Snake's knife hand at the wrist, his thumb pressing into a nerve cluster that made Snake's fingers spasm open. The knife clattered to the platform. In the same motion, Cooper's right elbow struck backward, catching the scarred man in the solar plexus just as his pipe swung threw him off balance. The man doubled over, gasping for air, the pipe rolling away across the concrete. Cooper now stood between the two men, unharmed and still perfectly balanced. Snake was on his knees, holding his wrist where Cooper had struck the nerve. The scarred man couldn't catch his breath, and Tommy had retreated all the way to the platform stairs. That, Cooper said calmly, was me being gentle. The next time I move, bones will break. Is that what you want? The station lights flickered again, casting harsh shadows across Snake's pain-twisted face. In those shadows, he finally saw what he should have noticed from the beginning. The cold, professional look in Cooper's eyes that spoke of real combat experience. This wasn't just a soldier. This was someone who had faced life-and-death situations and won. The real question was whether Snake would be smart enough to finally understand what he was dealing with, or whether his pride would push him to make one final, possibly devastating mistake. Snake's fists cut through the air where Cooper's head had been just a split second before, but Cooper wasn't there anymore. With a movement so smooth it looked almost casual, the soldier had shifted 6 inches to the left, just enough for the punch to miss completely. Snake's momentum carried him forward, throwing him off balance. What the? Snake started to say, but Cooper was already moving. In one fluid motion, Cooper dropped his duffel bag and stepped forward. His right hand caught Snake's extended arm at the wrist, while his left hand found Snake's elbow. To anyone watching, it would have looked like Cooper was simply guiding Snake's arm, but the biker suddenly found himself facing the wrong direction. His arm locked behind his back at an angle that sent waves of pain through his shoulder. Don't move, Cooper said quietly, his voice still perfectly calm. I don't want to dislocate your shoulder. The nervous one panicked, rushing forward with a wild haymaker punch. Cooper saw it coming from a mile away. Without releasing Snake, he simply turned, using the bigger man as a shield. The nervous one's punch hit Snake in the back, making him howl in pain. Tommy! You idiot! Snake yelled at his nervous friend. The scarred man with the brass knuckles circled around, looking for an opening. His eyes showed experience. He knew he was dealing with someone far more dangerous than they had expected. He feinted left, then tried to strike from the right. Cooper responded with the kind of precision that came from years of training. He released Snake with a push that sent him stumbling into Tommy, then stepped inside the scarred man's punch. What happened next was so fast that anyone watching would have missed it. Cooper's elbow struck upward, catching the man's wrist at exactly the right point. The brass knuckles flew from his hand, clattering across the platform. "Those are illegal in this state," Cooper said, kicking the weapon toward the train tracks. "That's another felony charge you don't need." Snake had regained his balance and was now facing Cooper, his face red with rage and embarrassment. "Get him," he shouted to his friends. "He can't take all of us at once." But Cooper was already moving again. His stance shifted slightly, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, hands raised in a way that didn't look threatening but could transition instantly to either attack or defense. It was a stance that had served him well in dozens of combat situations. "Think about what you're doing," Cooper warned them. "So far, nobody's seriously hurt. We can all walk away from this." Tommy, the nervous one, looked like he wanted to run, but Snake's pride wouldn't let him back down now. He charged forward, trying to tackle Cooper around the waist. At the same time, the scarred man came in from the side, thinking he had found an opening. Cooper moved like water. He sidestepped Snake's charge while simultaneously blocking the scarred man's punch. Snake's momentum carried him past Cooper, and the soldier used that momentum, adding just a slight push that sent Snake crashing into the station wall. The scarred man threw another punch, but Cooper caught his arm and twisted, using the man's own movement to throw him off balance. Tommy watched in shock as his two friends, both experienced street fighters, were being handled like children by this soldier who hadn't even broken a sweat. Cooper stood between the three bikers, his stance relaxed but ready, his breathing steady and controlled. "This isn't a movie," Cooper said, his eyes moving between the three men. "I'm not going to knock you out or try to prove anything. I'm trained to end threats efficiently with minimal force. But if you continue, I will defend myself, and I promise you won't enjoy the experience." Snake pushed himself away from the wall, wiping blood from his nose where he had hit the concrete. The scarred man was holding his arm where Cooper had twisted it. Tommy had backed up several steps, all his earlier bravado gone. "You got three choices," Cooper continued, his voice still calm. "First, you can leave now, and we all go home without any more trouble. Second, you can keep fighting and he'll be forced to hurt you more seriously. Or third, you can wait for the police. I'm sure they'd love to hear about the brass knuckles and attempted assault." The station speakers crackled to life, announcing the train's imminent arrival. But everyone knew this confrontation would be decided long before any train pulled into the station. Snake's fingers were just inches from Cooper's collar when the soldier spoke again, his voice carrying the kind of quiet confidence that only comes from real experience. "Those brass knuckles your friend is holding, that makes this armed assault. You really want to turn a simple night into a felony?" The words made Snake pause for just a second. Something in Cooper's tone was different from their usual victims. This wasn't the voice of someone scared. This was the voice of someone making sure his attackers understood exactly what they were getting into. "Listen to this guy," Snake laughed, but his eyes showed a flicker of uncertainty. "Trying to give us a legal lesson. This ain't a courthouse, hero. This is my station." Cooper's eyes never stopped moving, tracking each man's position like he was reading a map. His combat training had taught him to notice everything. How the nervous one kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, how the scarred man's brass knuckles trembled slightly in his hand, and how Snake's right leg was favoring his left, probably an old injury. "Your station?" Cooper asked calmly. "Interesting, because I counted 4 security cameras on my way in. 3 are broken, but the one by the main entrance still works. It's got a clear view of all of us right now." This information made the nervous one look over his shoulder quickly. Cooper noted the reaction. Fear could make people unpredictable. "You think we care about cameras?" Snake growled, trying to hide how Cooper's words had affected him. Nobody's going to do anything about 3 local boys having a chat with a soldier. The scarred man moved closer, brass knuckles now fully visible. Boss, this guy's trying to play mind games. Let's just get this done. Cooper remained perfectly still, but his body was like a coiled spring. Every muscle was ready, his combat training turning his mind into a tactical computer. He could see at least 12 ways this could play out, and he was prepared for each one. You got about 10 seconds to make a choice, Cooper said, his voice still eerily calm. The smart choice is to walk away. Tell everyone you got what you wanted. Save face. No one has to know what happened here. Snake's face turned red with anger. No one talked to him like this, especially not in front of his crew. He grabbed Cooper's duffel bag strap, yanking it hard. Maybe you didn't hear me before, soldier boy. Your fancy uniform doesn't mean. Before Snake could finish his sentence, Cooper moved, just slightly, shifting his weight in a way that made Snake instinctively step back. It wasn't much movement, but it was enough to show that the soldier was far more dangerous than they had thought. That's your last warning, Cooper said quietly. I've spent 15 months in places where mistakes get people killed. I really don't want to hurt you, but I will defend myself. The nervous one spoke up, his voice shaky. Snake, maybe we Shut up. Snake snapped at him. Getting scared of one guy in a fancy uniform? Cooper watched as Snake's anger overtook his judgment, a fatal mistake he'd seen many times in combat. Angry people made bad decisions. They telegraphed their moves. They got sloppy. Let me explain something, Cooper said, his voice taking on a tone that would have been familiar to his fellow soldiers. The voice of someone about to take control of a situation. I'm not some random guy in a uniform. I spent the last decade training to handle situations exactly like this. The medals you're so interested in, they're not for parade. They're for combat. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the platform. In those shadows, Cooper could see Snake's friends starting to understand what their leader couldn't. They weren't dealing with an ordinary soldier. Last chance, Cooper said as Snake's hand clenched into a fist. Walk away. Instead of listening, Snake pulled back his arm, preparing to throw the first punch. In that moment, Cooper saw all the signs he'd been trained to look for, the telegraph of the punch, the poor balance, the overconfidence. As Snake's fist started moving through the air, time seemed to slow down for Cooper. His combat training kicked in automatically, his body preparing to demonstrate why picking a fight with a Special Forces combat instructor had been a very, very poor decision. The real lesson was about to begin. The 3 bikers spread out as they walked down Platform 3, an old tactic that Cooper had seen before, one that predators used to trap their prey. The leader, a tall man with a snake tattoo crawling up his neck, walked forward. Straight toward Cooper, his 2 friends moved to the sides, trying to cut off any escape routes. Well, what do we have here? The leader said, his voice rough from years of cigarettes. The patch on his vest read Snake, which matched the tattoo on his neck. Looks like we found ourselves a real American hero. Cooper remained silent, his eyes moving between the 3 men in a calm, calculated way. Snake was the biggest threat, about 62 and 240 pounds of prison yard muscle. The man to Cooper's left was shorter, maybe 58, with a nervous energy that made him dangerous. The 3rd guy, moving to Cooper's right, had hands covered in old fighting scars. None of them were strangers to violence. Not very friendly, are you, soldier boy? Snake said, getting closer. He smelled like cheap beer and cigarettes. All those pretty medals must mean you think you're better than us regular folks. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as a cold wind swept through the station. Cooper shifted his duffel bag slightly, preparing for what might come next. His training had taught him to look for windows of opportunity, the subtle signs that could mean the difference between life and death. Right now, he noticed several things. Snake had a slight limp in his right leg, the nervous one kept his weight on his back foot, and the scarred one was trying to hide something in his jacket pocket. Nice uniform, the nervous one said, his voice high and mocking. Bet it cost a lot. Maybe you'd like to make a donation to some local veterans. He laughed at his own joke, showing teeth stained yellow from tobacco. Cooper finally spoke, his voice calm and controlled. I don't want any trouble, gentlemen. My train will be here soon, and we can all go our separate ways." This only seemed to amuse Snake more. He turned to his friends, grinning. "Did you hear that, boys? The soldier doesn't want any trouble. But see, that's not how things work at Millbrook Station after dark. Everything here has a toll." The scarred man moved closer, his hand still in his jacket pocket. "Boss, I think this hero needs to learn some respect for the local community." Snake nodded, reaching out toward one of Cooper's medals. "These look expensive. Maybe you could spare one for some poor civilians." Cooper didn't move, but his eyes tracked every motion. He noticed how Snake's friends were getting nervous. They'd probably done this many times before, but something about Cooper's calmness was throwing them off. Most people showed fear by now, but Cooper's face remained neutral, his breathing steady. "Last chance," Cooper said quietly. "Walk away." Snake laughed, but there was anger in it now. No one at Millbrook Station had ever dared to talk to him like that. He was used to people begging or running away, not standing calmly and telling him what to do. "Boys," Snake said, cracking his knuckles, "I think it's time we teach the soldier here about respect." The station speaker crackled again, announcing another 5-minute delay for the train. The noise made the nervous one jump slightly, and Cooper filed that information away. "Jumpy people made mistakes in fights. You know what I think?" Snake continued, moving even closer until he was just inches from Cooper's face. "I think all you military types are just playing dress-up, acting tough with your shiny medals and pressed uniforms. But out here in the real world, different rules apply." Cooper remained still, but his muscles tensed imperceptibly. He could smell the alcohol on Snake's breath, could see the dilated pupils that suggested more than just beer was involved. Years of combat experience told him that things were about to get physical. The scarred man finally pulled his hand from his pocket, revealing brass knuckles that glinted under the station lights. The nervous one shifted his weight, preparing to move. Snake's grin grew wider as he reached for Cooper's collar. What none of them realized was that they had made 3 crucial mistakes. First, they had assumed Cooper's calm meant weakness. Second, they hadn't noticed his subtle changes in stance. And third, most importantly, they had chosen to threaten someone who had spent the last 15 months in combat zones, training daily in how to handle exactly this kind of situation. The night was about to teach them all a very painful lesson. The cold November wind whistled through the empty Millbrook train station as Staff Sergeant James Cooper stood alone on Platform 3. The station's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the concrete floor. It was 11:45 p.m., and Cooper was waiting for the last train that would finally take him home to his family after 15 long months in Afghanistan. Cooper wasn't a particularly large man, standing at 510 with an athletic build, but his presence carried the quiet confidence of someone who had seen more than his share of difficult situations. His dress uniform was perfectly pressed, medals neatly arranged on his chest, each one telling its own story of courage and service. The polished black shoes reflected the dim station lights, and his cap sat perfectly straight on his head, exactly as regulations required. As he checked his watch again, Cooper couldn't help but think about his family. His wife Sarah and their 2 kids, Emma and Michael, didn't know he was coming home tonight. He had wanted to surprise them. The original plan was to arrive earlier, but flight delays in Germany had forced him to catch this late train instead. Still, the thought of seeing their faces in the morning made the wait worthwhile. The empty station felt eerily quiet. Cooper had gotten used to this kind of silence during his night missions, but something felt different about tonight. His combat-trained instincts, the same ones that had kept him and his team alive during countless operations, were quietly alerting him that something wasn't quite right. He shifted his duffel bag to his other shoulder and scanned the platform, a habit that had become second nature during his military career. The sound came first, the deep rumble of motorcycle engines cutting through the night's silence. Cooper's ears picked up the distinct noise of 3 different bikes, each with a slightly different pitch to their exhaust notes. Through the station's glass walls, he could see 3 motorcycles pulling into the nearly empty parking lot. The riders weren't wearing proper riding gear, just leather jackets decorated with patches and chains. Years of training had taught Cooper to notice details quickly. The first bike was a beaten-up Harley-Davidson with rusty chrome and missing side panels. Its rider was the largest of the three, wearing a vest covered in patches that Cooper recognized from local gang reports. The second bike was a cheaper Japanese model, its blue paint scratched and faded. The third was another Harley, newer but modified with illegal straight pipes that made it unnecessarily loud. Cooper watched as they parked their bikes, making more noise than necessary in the quiet lot. He didn't move from his spot, but his body subtly shifted into a more balanced stance, another unconscious habit from years of training. His right hand remained relaxed at his side while his left held onto his duffel bag strap, ready to use it as a defensive tool if needed. The station security camera in the corner was broken. Had been for months, according to the faded out-of-order sign beneath it. Cooper had noticed this detail when he first arrived, just as he had noticed the emergency phone with its cut wire and the fact that the station manager's office was dark and empty. The nearest working security camera was at the station's main entrance, too far to capture anything that might happen on Platform 3. The sound of heavy boots on concrete echoed through the station as the bikers made their way up the stairs to the platform. Cooper could smell the mixture of leather, cigarettes, and alcohol before they even reached the top. He remained still, his face neutral, but his mind was already running through scenarios and options, another gift from his extensive military training. The station's old speaker system crackled to life, announcing that the 11:55 train to Springfield would be delayed by 10 minutes due to technical issues. Cooper didn't react to the news, but he noticed how the announcement made the bikers pause briefly before continuing their approach. 10 more minutes alone on this platform suddenly felt much longer than it should have. As the bikers emerged onto Platform 3, Cooper could finally see their faces clearly under the fluorescent lights. Their expressions carried the unmistakable look of people looking for trouble, a look he had seen many times before in very different places. The largest one, clearly their leader, made eye contact with Cooper and smiled, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. The night was about to get interesting.